Welcome to the office of the Leader of the Opposition's press conference for December 6, 2022. Good morning, all. I will start by introducing my panel from the right. To my right, there is none other than Member of Parliament, Mr. Ganesh Maipal. To his right, economist Mr. Elson Lowe. And to his right is Mr. Randolph Critchlow. And to his right is Member of Parliament, Ms. Nima Flubeth. And to her right is none other than Senior Counsel, Mr. Royalsdale Ford, Member of Parliament. All right. So today's press statement will be read in two parts, and we will begin with the first half by Mr. Randolph Critchlow.
Thank you, Shanika. Thank you, members of the press. Culture, youth, and sport slowly dying under Ramson's incompetence and ineptness. Over the last 2 years, Guyanese have witnessed the gradual regression of culture, youth, and sport under the visionless leadership of Minister Charles Ramson, who has managed the Herculean task of simultaneously killing theater, neglecting our athletes, and cutting youth development programs put in place by the APNU-AFC while ignoring the works done on the culture, youth, and sport policies. It is more than concerning that Minister Ramson, who has reportedly uttered on several occasions that he does not desire to have responsibility for culture, youth, and sport, citing his background and his training, is being allowed to use the ministry as his personal nepotistic playground while in turn neglecting the needs of our sportsmen and women, cultural practitioners, and the youths of Guyana. On culture, serious questions are being asked about the role of the minister's wife, Ms. Alana Sibiran, who is allegedly acting in the capacity of cultural advisor to the minister, who is playing an active role in planning and executing cultural events. Apart from the obvious conflict of interest and nepotism, the Guyanese people deserve to know whether the minister's wife is employed by the ministry, if she is being paid, and what are the terms of her agreement with the ministry. Members of the staff of the ministry are concerned about the diminished role of the Director of Culture, who is qualified and employed to function in the capacity and perform many of the tasks being performed by the minister's wife. It is very worrying. It's a very worrying development, especially since many of the artists, numerous complaints were lodged by the artists and local performers about the disrespect during the hosting of the cricket carnival activities. And they have to be subject to things like auditions in front of the minister's wife for selection to perform at the Guyana night. We also note that the president gave the artists who performed at the One Guyana concert a top-up on the agreed sum to the tune of a total of 6.9 million. While we are happy that the artists have received these payments, it is necessary to recall that during the cricket carnival period, there were many other activities and concerts outside of the One Guyana concert. One such concert was the Night of Legends. What is interesting to note is that the Ministry of Culture, Youth, and Sport had the temerity to tell those artists who performed at the Night of Legends that the concert did not make money and hence they could not be paid. Fortunately, the ministry eventually reached an agreement with those artists and they were paid half the amount. Mind you, this is the same government that doled out billions in support of Cricket Carnival and paid the artists double who performed at the One Guyana concert, while those who performed at the Night of Legend had to settle for half. It is also interesting to note that local producers seeking to rent the National Culture Center are now subject to having to call the minister directly for him to give permission. So bad is the situation that one of the producers of one of the longest running yearly satirical review reportedly had to have her husband call President Ali to instruct Minister Ramson to allow them to rent the National Cultural Center after the minister allegedly refused to give permission. One would remember that the theater community pushed back when the minister tried to unilaterally raise the rental cost of the National Cultural Center by more than 300%. This action by the minister, or these actions by the minister, are killing culture in Guyana. Finally, on culture, we take note of the concerns of the theater fraternity over the continued absence of the National Drama Festival, which is taken from under the control of the National School of Theater Arts and Drama, and apparently now is being administered directly from the minister's office. In a meeting with producers 2 weeks ago, the minister, while pitching an idea for some yearly programs, suggested that the National Drama Festival is too expensive. We certainly hope that this is another excuse being proffered by the minister, especially in light of the recent splurging on Cricket Carnival. We welcome the support that the ministry is willing to give the local seasoned actors, but we cannot neglect the National Drama Festival, which is a fertile proving ground, a fertile ground for the discovery of new talent all across the country. We hope that the ministry continues to fund the National Drama Festival. On youth, we'll say that when the minister took up his post, he met a Department of Youth that was working to bring training and development to especially disadvantaged young people across our country. The Department of Youth is supposed to be run by a professional public servant as the director. But what we have right now is the director of youth being a PPP party hack. Consequently, training centers are becoming white elephants. Let me give you an example. The Sophia Training Center has not seen any new programs in over 2 years. And the center has seen multiple cuts to courses, especially those courses that are benefiting young girls. This must be noted. The APNU AFC implemented a number of night schools aimed at giving mature students a second chance at writing CXE. The minister closed them. It is interesting to note that the minister refused to fund those night schools. Now, when they refused to fund those night schools, it was Ipadagy which had to pick up the slack and fund them. The PPP vindictively defunded that organization also. Additionally, the APNU AFC government was funding musical corps in Berbice and in Linden, but that funding has also been cut by the minister. One is left to wonder how you could have an anti-youth, anti-sport, and anti-culture person at the head of the Ministry of Culture, Youth, and Sport. The Minister of Culture, Youth, and Sport needs to rethink his position and reinstate funding for those programs for our young people. Finally, on sport. All we will ask at this point in time is for the ministry, the minister, and the National Sports Commission to show Guyanese where the $3.2 billion allocated for development in sport has gone. The recent revelations by our national athletes, including national boxer Kevin Alicock, have indicated that those billions have not gone into helping them. It is clear that Minister Ramson believes that the management of youth, sport, and culture is about 3 minutes speaking about his portfolio responsibility in the budget presentation earlier this year. Minister Ramson seems to be drowning in his own incompetence. Unfortunately, he is killing youth, sport, and culture when they need to be developed. Our athletes, artists, and young people need a serious minister, and it cannot be Charles egotistical Ramson. Here ends that part of the statement.
Thank you. The other part of the statement will be read by Mr. Elson Snow.
Good day, everyone. Supplemental budget exposes PPP's disregard for the real needs of the Guyanese people. This must surely be the worst supplemental budget in Guyana's history. When Guyanese consider the $44 billion the government has recently approved in the National Assembly, precious little of which is for urgent or unexpected expenses, it is clear that the PPP is so disconnected from the realities of the day that the party probably believes it governs neighboring Suriname and not our dear Guyana. This is the second opportunity the government has had to provide Guyanese with cost of living relief. And it is the second time ordinary people have been left dismayed. Why has the government refused to put the $60 billion of unexpected oil revenue we benefited from this year to use in fighting the cost of living crisis? That amounts to roughly $300,000 per household, every dollar of which Guyanese desperately needed. What the government has decided to spend on in its biggest single line item is the upgrade of roads and drainage. $18 billion has been put toward this, but no detail has been provided as to which roads and drains will be upgraded. Of course, we believe Guyana's infrastructure must be continuously improved, but what serious party would not adequately plan for the upgrade of roads and drainage in Guyana, where the number of rivers is only exceeded by the number of potholes? Are we to believe that the PPP, in all honesty, didn't expect heavy rains this Christmas? The same rains which happen every year? Or rather, is this budget yet another PPP attempt to steal everything in sight? In a supplemental budget, we should be seeing responses to the unexpected inflation escalation that has gripped the country. This means direct cost of living relief, as well as an emergency additional increase in public servant pay to bring the total annual increase to a minimum of 25%. We should not be seeing expenses that we could have predicted at the beginning of the year. The total budgetary allocation for 2022, when you include the previous $44.8 billion supplemental budget and this one, is now an enormous $645 billion. Of that $645 billion, only a shameful, minuscule 0.8% has been directly allocated to cost of living mitigation. The government likes to point to its tiny, sporadic cash grants, or its grant for school children, to say that it is spending the people's money fighting this cost of living crisis. These are the minimal measures that might have been expected if Guyana was not facing record inflation or producing a single barrel of oil. They are wholly inappropriate given the scale of the increase in food prices and the immense 350,000 barrels of oil a day production we have seen all year. The PPP continues to peddle the same old lie that oil revenues are not enough to improve people's lives, increase public servant salaries substantially, and eradicate poverty. But this year's oil revenues are larger than entire government budgets only a few years ago. The PPP is pretending there isn't enough money, not because there is any shortage of funds, but because they believe that money is only for their elite. As yet another supplemental budget has demonstrated, ordinary Guyanese have nothing save misery to expect from the PPP. The audit of Exxon's oil receipts must include an assessment of reasonable and competitive prices. If you need any evidence that the PPP is totally unfit to manage Guyana's oil industry, look no further than the audit of ExxonMobil's costs in developing our nation's oil fields. First, the PPP allowed the deadline for the audit to expire and therefore had to ask the company for an extension to the deadline, which was a national embarrassment. Second, they only agreed to actually conduct that audit after overwhelming public pressure, which signaled to the world their corrupt intentions. Third, the calamity that appears to be about to befall our embattled country is that the audit itself is unlikely to meet even the most basic expectations, potentially leading the nation to lose hundreds of millions of US dollars. This folly cannot be allowed to continue. The nation was recently alerted that the long-awaited audit of ExxonMobil's $7 billion 2018 to 2020 cost recovery bill will only be an audit of its legitimacy or validity. This raises a question as to whether the costs themselves are being interrogated. One of the major concerns that is being raised as Exxon looks to cost recover its expenses is whether these costs have been inflated. The PPP needs to come clean to the nation as to the exact nature of this audit. The terms of reference for this audit must be released so we know what specifically the auditors have been contracted to do. Failure to properly audit Exxon is a dereliction of duty of the most heinous form. Hundreds of millions of US dollars are at stake. Even further, this nation cannot afford to let any company, let alone the one operating the nation's largest resource reserves, believe that we Guyanese, out of ignorance or foolhardiness or corrupt intent, will not closely monitor what we are being charged. That is a recipe for disaster, and no serious government would receive a bill for over $7 billion US dollars and not check to see whether the prices it is being charged are reasonable and competitive. Further, it is clear that not only does Guyana have the right to verify whether Exxon's expenses are inflated, this is expected under the PSA. Annex C of the PSA, accounting procedure, in section 1.5 states, the minister shall have the right to audit accounts and records of the contractor. Additionally, Annex C, section 3.1b, subsection 1 and 2, indicate that some costs can only be recovered once they have been verified as reasonable and competitive. Subsection 1 states, the actual costs of contracts for technical and other services entered into by the contractor for the petroleum operations made with third parties other than affiliated companies of the contractor are recoverable, provided that the prices paid by the contractor are competitive with those generally charged by other international or domestic suppliers for comparable work and services. Subsection 2 continues, without prejudice to the charges to be made in accordance with subsection 2.5. In the case of services rendered to the petroleum operations by an affiliated company, the charges will be based on actual costs without profits. The charges will be no higher than the usual prices charged by the affiliated company to third parties for comparable services under similar terms and conditions elsewhere, and will be fair and reasonable in light of prevailing international oil industry practice and conditions. The PPP is so deep in Exxon's pockets that they are choking on the lint. Even where the country has legitimate rights that it can exercise to safeguard Guyanese, as demonstrated in the quotes above, the PPP refuses to do so. We recently heard, finally, that the new model PSA will be subject to public consultations. We have been demanding its release and such consultations for months. Together with civil society, we have forced the PPP to yield, to provide Guyanese what they are entitled to, which is some measure of transparency and accountability. We look forward to seeing this PSA and similarly look forward to the release of the audit of Exxon's expenses. The PPP cannot be allowed to treat this country's patrimony with an equal measure of carelessness, malice, and contempt. Guyanese must oppose them on every front. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, Mr. Roysdale Ford, Senior Counsel, Member of Parliament, will give a short presentation.
Good morning. Thank you, Shanika. Thank you for the opportunity to bring to the nation's attention the rationale and the filing of the recent proceedings in the name of Carol Smith-Joseph, who is the Chief Scrutineer of the Partnership for National Unity Alliance for Change. Ms. Joseph filed these proceedings because it became necessary in view of the failure of the Guyana Elections Commission to comply with the relevant law in the preparation of the Register of Voters for the purpose of the local government elections. The Local Government Election Act requires that an order be issued under Section 8 and in the consequent sections between Sections 8 and 24 that the local government elections list is prepared in accordance with that act. Strangely, the Guyana Elections Commission decided that they will implement the process under the Election Laws Amendment Act Section 5.6, which required the preparation of the voters list for national and regional elections, and based on the decision by the Chief Justice in the case of Ram against the Attorney General, the question of residency no longer applies as a criteria or element in the preparation of such a list. Consequently, therefore, that list that would have been prepared could not have been relevant for the purposes of the legal obligations set out in law under the Local Government Elections Act. The Local Government Elections Act, particularly by Section 10, requires that a list, or what is called a register under that act, be prepared on the basis of persons who are ordinarily resident in the local authority areas. As a consequence, this list could not be used, and we have filed these legal proceedings. The consequence of that failure to comply with the law, and as part of our legal proceedings, we have attached a list of persons that we would have compiled in relation to the Union Local Government Authority area of Region Number 5, and in particular in relation to Constituency 3, the Unverwacht Golden Grove area. And in that area alone, to show the impact of the failure of the Guyana Elections Commission to comply with the law, we have compiled in excess of 200 persons who are not ordinarily resident and therefore consequently able to vote in that area. Among the persons who we believe and we have established are not competent to vote because they're not ordinarily resident in the area is one Alicia Davina Dharamlal, who, based on our reports, is the sister of the current Minister of Local Government, Nigel Dharamlal, who unfortunately passed over 10 years ago. She remains on the list, and this is the clearest evidence of the failure of the government to ensure that GCOM complies with the law. And as I said last night, the measures introduced by the government in relation to the Representation of the People's Act and the National Registration Act in the debate brought by the government in relation to those two pieces of legislation. The government does not want to deal with the issues of the failure of GCOM and the failure to produce a proper electoral list. So we have identified a clear evidence here, clear evidence of over 200 persons in one constituency. We ask you that you remain involved in the following of this matter and the consequential developments that will take place. We have since learned that the Chief Elections Officer have written to the Chairman and the other members of the Guyana Elections Commission, pointing out that it is his opinion that the elections may not be able to be proceeded with in the current timeline, and they will have a delay. These delays are solely the responsibility, and the blame must be taken for them by the Guyana Elections Commission by the failure to comply with the relevant laws. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, we will take questions on the press statement and as well on senior counsel's brief. I see the hand of Ms. Davina. You can go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My question is to Mr. Elson. You spoke about the audit, and I wanted to know specifically, can you say if this cost recovery audit that is being done, based on your experience and so on, can you say if it's going to look into any shell companies or so on that may be supplying the oil sector, or can we just expect them to be checking bills sort of in this audit that they're conducting?
Thank you very much for the question there. So essentially, as we had mentioned at the previous press conference, the real concern is that it's, at least from the remarks that have been made and the lack of clarity provided by the government, is that it looks as if the auditor is just going to be checking bills, whereas the PSC stipulates that the auditor must, in actual fact, verify these costs. Now, in the process of verifying those costs, it is very possible that shell companies and so on will come to the attention of the auditors. Now, it is not their responsibility to carry out whether it is a civil or criminal investigation of anything to that effect. But if they do come across such companies, it will be their responsibility to make the nation aware that that is what they've come across and that there's concerns there. That would then prompt or should prompt other investigative agencies to look more closely at those particular companies. But at the very least, through a proper audit which allows us to identify an inflation of costs, we may be able to get a sense of what might be a shell company.
Thank you. I have another question. Can I go ahead here?
Yes, you may.
Thanks. So, Mr. Low, again, you as the opposition spokesperson on oil and gas matters, we see that Exxon has given their top officials a 10% increase, even if their profits increase, while Guyana is not getting anything from these massive profits that they're benefiting from. Can you say how you feel about this, given that the opposition leader has consistently said that he believes we should be benefiting more?
Well, I don't know how Exxon has determined that it is going to compensate its executives. What I can say is that we reiterate our position that we should be getting more from this contract, and that is a discussion that we believe needs to be ongoing with the contractor. We've previously spoken about the extraordinarily high oil price. We'll have to see what the new year brings. And we've previously spoken about the way that the nation could benefit, which is through sliding scale royalty regimes. So from that perspective, that's what we're looking at in the next year. Executive compensation can have many factors behind it.
Thank you.
One other quick one, if I can.
Yes.
Thank you. Government has signed, well, they said that they have signed an agreement with ExxonMobil for the gas to energy project. We know that Mr. Patterson has requested a copy of this agreement in the Assembly. However, they have told him that this document cannot be released as yet. What are your thoughts on this, Mr. Lowe?
I find that to be very, very alarming. Any agreement that is signed, one would presume is an agreement that has been finalized. And so such an agreement needs to make its way to the public so that we can examine the terms and so that we can get a sense of whether the nation has gotten the appropriate deal or whether there are some further questions to be asked. So we would say that any such agreement we absolutely believe should be released so that at least the opposition can have a look at it and address the nation on that front.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Shabral.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Ford. Sir, can you say why the name of Ms. Darnell's sister and the other persons, I think you said there was a total of about 200, why were they identified during the claims and objections process in order to make representation to the Elections Commission or reassigned?
Thank you, Dennis, for the question. Dennis, the information of Ms. Dharamlal, the sister of the minister, I cannot tell you when the party became in possession of the information. What I can certainly assure you is that in the context of local government election and the preparation of a list for this purpose, the party examined the lists produced by GCOM in relation to the different local authority areas. And in the context of that list produced for the context of the local authority areas, where the obligation is on GCOM to prepare a list of persons ordinarily resident, we found upon examination that that name and the other 200 names, this is only in relation to one constituency, by the way, and we would certainly be confident enough to say at this stage that this occurrence would be replicated over the odd 80 constituencies for local government elections. So I'm saying to you that in the context of the preparation of the list and the requirements for the list, upon examination of the list produced, it was found that GCOM failed to discharge its obligation, and among the persons that is evidencing that failure is the name of Davina Alicia Dharamlal, the sister of the current Minister of Local Government.
I understand that, but I'm trying to find out why is it that you were unable to do all of this work during the claims and objections period. So probably you may have been able to confirm the presence of other undesirable names and other constituencies with certainty, rather than just using the 200 as a possible extrapolation of what may be occurring in other constituencies.
Well, Dennis, let me point out again. The requirements for local government elections are not the same requirements for national and regional elections. And I'm saying to you that in answer to that question, that in the context of the list produced by the Guyana Elections Commission for local government, we discovered among the names Davina Alicia Dharamlal, the sister of the current Minister of Local Government, as not fitting the requirement for persons who should be on a list for local authority area.
Dennis, I want to add something, please. Are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, Mr. Mahipol.
Thank you. We have constantly said that the claims and objection period is not one that can properly clean the list. And I think you have heard that from us umpteen times. Everyone knows that Minister Dharamlal unfortunately lost his sister. Even he said so in the National Assembly some time back. And we know that the name of the sister is still on the list. Any objection to that name during the claims and objection period would have required us to present the original copy of the death certificate, something that we don't have. And I don't think Dharamlal would have even given us the copy to present at the claims and objection or the objection period. So it comes back to the entire system of claims and objection and what is required for the objection. And the same way how we know Mr. Dharamlal's sister is no longer with us, there are many others that have passed, and we may not have the original documentation to substantiate the claim to GCOM for them to act, even though we know the person died. And that is why we have constantly, as a political party, said that the claims and objection period does not give us the clear need to ensure that there is a clean voters list for credible elections. Thank you.
What then can GCOM do in the absence of the supporting documents, in this case, the death certificate?
Dennis, that's a very good question for the Honorable Claudette Singh. And I trust you'll ask her whenever she holds a press conference.
But don't you know?
Well, I, like my colleagues and my entire political party, support the need for constitutional reform. We are lawmakers, and we are prepared to support all actions necessary in the National Assembly for us to have house-to-house registration so that we can come with a clean and credible list of electors for free and fair elections, and I might dare say, elections that are free from fear. We as lawmakers are prepared to do that.
Could you, Mr. Ford, please elaborate on what are the other defects concerning the 200 other names, other than Mr. Darnell's?
Well, I will yield to Comrade Ford, who has the legal expertise here.
Well, in relation to that question, Dennis, we're speaking in the context of a local government election. And I previously stated this morning that the principal requirement is the person must be ordinarily resident in the district or the local authority area. Apart from that, the person must be over the age of 18. He must be a Guyanese citizen. So in the context of those obligations, the list that we would have shared with the Guyana Election Commission include persons who would have died. They would have included persons who were not ordinarily resident and not in the local authority area and residing in the local authority area within the meaning of Section 10 and being ordinarily resident. So in the context of that question, that is the answer that I can provide at this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Adam Harris.
Yes. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is a question for Mr. Ford and perhaps Mr. Mahipal. Now there was talk about shifting constituency boundaries and all of that. Have you been able to verify that with the shifting of these boundaries, people have been properly placed within these new confines, or have people been excluded? And that would impact the residency requirement.
Good morning, Adam. In response to that, our preliminary investigations would have revealed that the list currently as printed and released to the public does not accurately and properly capture changes of constituency boundaries. There are persons who ought to have been in new boundaries are outside of them, and persons who are within new boundaries as published by the list are not properly so placed based on the requirements. But Adam, there's a more fundamental issue involved here rather than just simply the location of the boundaries and whether the residents or the voters are competently placed. The underlying question here is a legal question as to the competency of the local government minister to unilaterally exercise a power to alter constituency boundaries. And I believe a proper examination of the law would reveal that the Minister of Local Government is not possessed with that authority to change constituency boundaries within a local authority area. The local democratic organs vest the minister with the power to create local authority areas, but not to fix constituency boundaries within those areas. That is a power that is devolved and vested by the Constitution and a number of supporting legislation which vests that power within the ambit, within the breast solely of the Guyana Elections Commission. So consequently, the of a list based on such an improper exercise of power by the local government minister will obviously impact negatively on the legality and compliance with the law in relation to a list.
Thank you.
So that being the case, are we therefore saying that the local government elections are in shambles, that one, the GCOM should not recognize the shifted boundaries since it didn't authorize any shift in boundaries?
Certainly, Adam, at this stage, I will say that the entire system, the entire rollout of all mechanisms necessary for the proper holding of our local government elections in accordance with the Local Government Elections Act, the Local Democratic Organs Act, and the powers vested in the Guyana Elections Commission, it is completely in shambles. It is a complete, total, devastating mess. It is an embarrassment to the country, and it's a shame that after so many months of the call for local government elections that the first rodeo of the chief elections officer has turned to be such a total embarrassment, such a total calamity for the Elections Commission. And what is more worrying is the silence of the chairman of the Elections Commission, why the citizens go through this charade.
And let me add also, just for clarity purpose, because I know that the PPP will want to say, as they have said last night in the House, that the coalition does not want local government election. Let me say lucidly here and now, the APNU AFC supports local government elections. We have demonstrated that in 2016 and 2018, and we are prepared for local government elections. But we do not want an election or elections in the 80 local authority areas that will not be credible. We do not want elections that will not have a proper system in place. We want free and fair elections, and we want elections that are free from fair. And GCOM has to get its house in order to facilitate the local government elections and all other elections that will fall under its ambit. And we are also well informed that the CEO has recognized that there are a lot of problems within the Guyana Elections Commission that needs to be fixed for us to have at least or at minimum a proper local government elections. So on that front, let me say again, the APNU AFC has always and will always support local government elections and the holding of it. But it must be credible, it must be fair, and the system for holding those elections ought to be intact. And I remind the media and the public that for the 23 years the People's Progressive Party sat in government, only in 1994 local government elections were held. Thank you.
I see the hand of Ms. Tamika Rodney. Ms. Rodney? All right. Well, I don't know what happened there. I will take the question from Mr. Vickery.
Good morning, all. Mr. Ford, since this is a breach, since the move to adjust the boundaries was a breach of the Constitution, do you think that it is now time to seek the court's intervention in the matter? Because you're outlining that if we go to next year, there are going to be issues in terms of boundaries and in terms of other legal things, but are you going to attempt to go to the courts to stop this? And my second question is, do you think, how has the current change to the boundaries affected your own representatives that are going to contest next year? We know nominations day is basically next week. How has the boundary changes affected those contesting, your candidates contesting in the district?
Well, thank you, Mr. Vickery, for the questions. I'll deal with the second one first, because I believe that it explains the nature of the problem confronting my party at this stage. First, in relation to the question of nomination, to be able to be a candidate at the local government elections, you must produce nominations signed and supported by members of your local authority area. Now, obviously, if I go and prepare a nomination for myself, signed by persons who are not properly placed in my boundary, it will affect my nomination and it will be ruled null and void by the same chief elections officer who was complicit in this process. So obviously it affects that. It affects the campaigning, it affects the allocation of resources, allocation of time. So it is first the elementary system, is the bedrock of a proper local government elections, is the proper creation and identification of boundaries and constituencies. So the failure to do that is a monumental failure on the part of the local government election process and by the Guyana Elections Commission. And it goes to the core of my party's ability to participate meaningfully. It goes to the core of the ability of independent candidates, or indeed any candidate who want to participate fairly in a local government system in which the boundaries are known and established ahead of time and the constituencies established within those boundaries or authorities. The second question is whether legal proceedings will be instituted against this process. I could certainly tell you that we are disposed to do so. We are confident that the institution of any such proceedings will result in the exercise of power of the local government minister being set aside, but my party is currently engaging in further considerations which will impact upon that decision, which we will not disclose at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Rodney, are you now ready?
Sorry about it just now. Mr. Ford, I noticed that the CEO would have suggested a 440-day exercise for the issues the coalition would have raised in relation to the list to be addressed. Can you say if your party is satisfied with that period, or whether it should be extended?
I'll answer the question. First, I want to go back to a question asked by Dennis Chabral, earlier this morning, about the claims and objections periods. And I believe that it is a perception in the public, and one which would have been propagated by the Guyana Elections Commission, that their sole responsibility is to go to the National Register of Registrants, produce a list, and throw it out there, for it to be corrected by a process of claims and objections by the Guyanese people. I believe nothing further indicates a wrong mindset and a derogation of the Guyana Elections Commission's responsibility under the Constitution and their duty. Their duty is to prepare a list that complies with the standards, both in relation to local government and the national elections systems. So it is not necessarily for a list to be corrected by claims and objections by the citizens. It is prima facie a process where the list is prepared in compliance with the law by Guyana Elections Commission, and then it is placed in public for the public as part of an entire electoral process to offer its comments thereon. So the reason why I refer to the failure of the Guyana Elections Commission to produce the list as I identified in relation to the constituent 3 of this local authority area, because it is manifest that the Guyana Elections Commission, without regard to its obligations, simply put the list out there, simply put the same list, which was largely a list of dead persons who would not have been qualified to vote in any event, simply put a list of persons who are not resident in a local authority area. Just put it out there. And the citizens must come, the electorate must come to correct it. That is fundamentally flawed and unacceptable, completely unacceptable. So I just want to deal with that, because that informs, I believe, my answer to your question.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Vickery. Or is it by error? All right, any other questions?
All right, yes, please, if I could.
Go ahead, Mr. Harris.
All right. I wanted to ask Mr. Ford, because last week, I think it was last week, we did talk about the court action against the president for failing to appoint the Chancellor Chief Justice. And he said he would have approached his team. Mr. Ford, you would be a member of that team. Could you bring us up to speed on that, please?
Adam, that proceedings, as you know, would have been filed and is currently in the court. The last report we received is that it's now fixed for the 10th of January before Justice Young. We would have had at least 2 or 3 dates for hearings, and on each and every occasion the matter had to be adjourned because the Attorney General wrote a letter asking for an adjournment. I believe that it is clear by now, based on the approach of the Attorney General and the President, that they don't want this matter to be heard and ventilated in the courts. It is one for which the President is culpable. He has been President for almost 2.5 years. He has failed to institute the necessary procedures for consultation under Article 127 of the Constitution. He can't run and hide, as he attempted to do through the affidavit filed by Gail Teixeira, in which they want to say that it's every conceivable president's fault prior to the assumption of office by Mr. Ali. Interestingly, there's a decision by Anil Nandalal in which he was a litigant against the Minister of Legal Affairs, in which he challenged the institution, or the failure to institute, should I say, of the Judicial Review Act. And in the very proceedings filed before, the Chief Justice came to the conclusion that the then Attorney General, Bassey Williams, even though he had been Attorney General for 2 to 3 years, the obligation to institute that act and to bring the order in place fell on him. It is completely similar. Mr. Ali can't dodge and run to say that he has only been there for 2 years and that he needs more time to implement the process of consultation, whilst at the same time pretending to himself that he is an emperor and that Guyana is not a republic and that he's not accountable to the Guyanese people. This is a republic. He's a president under the Constitution. He's a president under the law. And I expect on January 10th or shortly thereafter that the decision will be delivered by the court, which will make the president accountable to the people of Guyana and force him to discharge a very basic but important obligation to ensure that we have a permanent chancellor and a permanent chief justice. The leader of the opposition has authorized me by a letter which I would have sent out a month ago, informing the president that we are prepared to engage in the consultation and that we are prepared to support the confirmation of the current holders of the office of Chancellor and Chief Justice. So there's no way for the president to run.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, sorry about earlier. I wanted to follow up with a question. Last week, the party met with GCOM. Among the issues discussed was, in fact, the list and boundaries, the issues with the boundaries. Have they responded officially yet to you? And have you reached out for a follow-up from them? I realized probably nobody was at the meeting.
Yeah, I was at the meeting. We have not received any formal response from the Guyana Elections Commission. That also is a cause for concern in terms of the fact that, on one hand, the chief elections officer seemed to be very concerned about the state of the process for the holding of the Elections Commission, whilst at the same time unable to directly correspond with us to outline his concerns and to find a way to work for the resolution of this matter, or these matters.
And I must add that you would note that, as was said earlier, that the CEO is asking for more time. And it obviously means that the concerns raised were genuine concerns. And it obviously means that the concerns that we ventilated there by providing him with tangible evidence has caused him not to now recognize that he ought to fix the system, and he's requesting of GCOM commissioners and chairperson to grant him that extension. Whether 14 days is sufficient or not, I wouldn't know. But what I do know is that the system is not proper for the holding of local government elections right now.
And when you say the CEO, I probably would have missed that before. When you said the CEO was asking for time to do what? To respond to your
No,
questions or generally?
I'm talking about that letter that he wrote to the chairperson that asked for 14, that he's requesting from GCOM to commissioners to give him that 14 days duration to hold another exercise. So it is clear from that the genuinity of the concerns are important and ought to be fixed.
Thank you. At this time, let me just say I will open up for questions outside of the press statement.
I can ask another question.
1 second, Mr. Harris. I'll open up for questions outside of the press statement, or even if you have another one that is there. But Mr. Harris, I see the hand of Ms. Rodney up for a while, and then you can go.
Okay.
All right, thank you. With the issues that need to be resolved, it is likely that local government elections in March 13th will not be possible for the holding of these elections. When do you estimate that these resolved and there will be ample time for the elections to be held?
I don't think that's a question that we can possibly give an accurate answer to. I believe that's a suited question for the Guyana Elections Commission. And perhaps what we should do here is to ask GCOM, through the chairperson, to speak to the media and speak to the nation and tell us about their readiness for March 13th and tell us about their about how they are going about fixing the system, and the press will have that opportunity to cross-examine the chair of GCOM for her to provide the necessary answers to the nation, because the same way how we want answers, I am sure you also want answers.
I recall that you asked the same question a few moments ago, directing it to me. And I like to hazard an answer in this way. In the letter, I guess you would have seen, written by the Chief Elections Officer to the Chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission, you would have seen some reference to Section 24 of the Local Government Elections Act, in which the Chief Elections Officer is saying to the Chairman that he believes that many of the concerns raised by my party can be resolved by an application of that section. I just want the public to know that that is a most misconceived approach to the resolution of the issues which we raise. Firstly, it cannot resolve the issues which we raise, and the issues we raise are beyond Section 24. As I indicated, the Local Government Election Act is a scheme. You just simply can't parachute onto one section and say, I like this section, I'm going to run with it. The reason why I'm saying that is that elementary reading of the Local Government Election Act says that from Section 8 to Section 24, the process for the preparation of a voters list called a Register of Registrars under that Act. And you can't simply land on Section 24 when you have not created a list under the Act. The Act requires that a list to be created under that Act, and then the sections apply and operate. Section 24 cannot apply in this instance to a situation where a list is obviously prepared under the Election Laws Amendment Act on a different basis, on a different legal basis, and then to be applied just by the whims and fancies of the Chief Elections Officer to be cured in a manner not contemplated under another act. So in terms of what is required, I believe that the public and the media would be in a position now to understand whether the timelines set by the chairman of the Elections Commission, whether the timelines proposed by the Chief Elections Officer are readily applicable and capable of being achieved in the context of what are the true legal obligations of the Guyana Elections Commission at this time.
All right. I see the hand of Miss, I think it's Christine.
Hi, good day. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay, good day, everyone. Mr. Manny Paul, Krista Macklingham, NCN. I have two questions, actually, if you can assist with. The first one has to do with if AFC officially notified the coalition about leaving at the end of the month? If this was by any chance discussed at the executive level? And two, if the issue concerning the Region 10 vice chairmanship was settled, what's the outcome of that? That's all from me.
Well, if I may start with the second question first, a person in the name of Mr. Mark Gorin was sworn in as the regional vice chairman of Region 10. He is an AFC member, and I am well informed that the AFC vice chairman in the name of Ricky Ramsaroop and I believe Ms. Juretta Finance were present at the swearing in of Mr. Mark Gorin. So I think what I can do here is to congratulate Mr. Gorin on his assumption to office and wish him well in the execution of his duties as the newly elected regional vice chair. I know he will enjoy the support of Mr. Darren Adams, who is the current chairman of Region 10, and all councillors, because he was supported for that position and he enjoyed their full confidence there. So on that basis, I believe it is a welcome development for both the APNU and AFC. And with reference to the first question, I am unaware that there has been any official word from the AFC pertaining to leaving the coalition or not being a part. I'm unaware of that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. I know, Mr. Mike Paul, you wanted to say something.
Well, I wanted to inform the public and use this platform and also my friends here at the press to say that, as you know, 8 MPs were suspended sometime in July, and we have a court case that seeks to get remedy on our behalf, and I think the next court date is the 8th of December pertaining to the suspended MPs. But I want to inform the public that notwithstanding this drawn-out period that we have been back and forth in court, and that matter continues, 4 of the members of parliament have their suspension are over, and those members of parliament are Mr. Sherrod Duncan, Ms. Natasha Singh Lewis, Mr. Christopher Jones, and yours truly. So at the next sitting of the National Assembly, once all goes well, we are expected to be there. But notwithstanding that, our matter in the courts continue, and we still hold to the position that we were wrongfully suspended, we were not given a fair hearing, and due process was not followed, and the court documents spell out the other details. I don't know if Senior Counsel Roysdale Ford, my brother, wishes to add anything more to that.
Yes, I'd just like to add, again, it is a disappointment that the MPs had to suffer what is obviously an injustice, whilst this matter is prepared, awaiting decisions in the court. I believe that it constitutes another blotch against the court system, that persons would have to serve the period of a suspension whilst the matter remains in court.
Thank you. All right. I see the hand of Mr. Vickery and Ms. Garnett. I'll take them in that order as we proceed to wrap up today's press conference.
All right, good afternoon again. My question, yesterday, Vice President Barajan was quoted as saying that despite revenues of oil, Guyana still has a fiscal deficit. Just wanted your reaction on it, because I know that the party looks like in the past that when it left government, they were basically, what do you think about that?
Could you repeat the second part of your question? I didn't hear that too well.
All Alright, I'll go in over. I was saying that Vice President Barajatio's quoted the same yesterday that there was despite incoming revenues of oil, there's still a fiscal deficit. I know the party would have said that when they handed over, when they left office, there were monies in the coffers. I just wanted to know your reaction to Mr. Jatio's statement.
I think one of the things that is important for us to do going forward is to distinguish budgets that we had before there were substantial oil revenues available and budgets that we have when there are substantial oil revenues available. The Vice President knows very well that in the Sovereign Wealth Fund we have, I believe the last report is nearly 1.4 billion US dollars. And so while, yes, we may be, even if we are running a deficit, that is not something that I think should detract from the reality, which is that the country is immensely wealthy. We are producing right now, every single day, far more barrels of oil per day than Trinidad at the peak. No one believes the lie that Guyana doesn't have revenues. The PP needs to drop it. Everybody knows this is the second wealthiest country in terms of barrels of oil per person. Next year, you're going to have yet another FPSO coming online that by itself will produce nearly as much oil as the entirety of Trinidad at its peak. Nobody believes that. They need to abandon that line of argument, and they need to give the Guyanese people what it is that they really deserve to help them through this cost of living crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Garnett?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I have a big question. My first question is a follow-up to the question on the AFC. The AFC has made it clear to the press that they're leaving the coalition on the 31st of December. And given that that's just 26 days, 25 days away, is the PNCR or APNU at all worried about what this says about relations between the AFC and the APNU?
Tamika, first of all, as I said, there is no official correspondence from the AFC to the leader or chairman of the APNU. And unless there is a correspondence to that effect, I cannot speak to whether they will leave or will not leave. And in terms of worry, I have said before and I will say it again, the APNU is a strong, resilient political party and can competently do what is necessary for the people of this country. When they team up with the AFC, it's even easier, but that does not shortchange the fact that they are strong, resilient, and ready for any task. Thank you.
I would just like to add,
But
Ms. Garnett.
isn't it then a certain level of disrespect if you're telling the press, the whole public, you told the whole public, the entire country, that you're leaving the coalition you have with me, but days later, weeks later, you still have not even said to me officially that you're leaving me, but you've already told the whole country that you're leaving me. Isn't that a little disrespectful on some level?
The last time when I told you what was hypocritical, I didn't see it in the Guyana Chronicle. So I don't know if this one is going to go into the Guyana Chronicle. But as I said to you, the APNU is strong and resilient and ready for any battle. The AFC, as it stands right now, is a part of the coalition with the APNU. Anything that changes from that, the first person that will know is the Guyana Chronicle through Tamika.
And certainly, Ms. Garnett, whilst I understand your concern to know the state of the coalition, I wish to inform you, and I think it has been said by the leader of the Alliance for Change, that the Alliance for Change and the APNU remains part of a single list for the life of this parliamentary term. So I believe what is important and what is important for our constituency to understand is that for the life of this parliamentary term, we remain one solid, complete, unbreakable list in the National Assembly. And I believe that is something of importance, and I hope to see it on top of the Guyana Chronicle very soon.
Front page, Tamika, front page.
All right, thank you.
Left the
All right, 1 second. Hold on.
Another question.
Go ahead, and then I'll take Mr. Harris, whose hand has been up a while too. Ms. Garnett, you can go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, but I had some coffee. The government $150 million U.S. purchase agreement with Hess Corporation for the sale of carbon credits. We haven't seen anything coming out from the opposition camp on their thoughts on this, and we see a lot of civil organizations and the private sector noting that the agreement had a lot to do with the good leadership that is coming from the government. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you very much for your question. What we will be looking to see is how the money is used, whether the money actually benefits the people of Guyana. Because as we all know, when it comes to the PVP, it is very easy for a large sum of money to result in absolutely no benefit to Guyana. And so until we actually see that money results in benefit in people's standards of living and people's lives moving forward, we are not convinced by any sum of money. You'll recall that we just minutes ago spoke about over $1 billion in the Sovereign Wealth Fund. We've spoken about the hundreds of millions of US that the country has made just due to the high oil price, unexpected revenues. But at the same time, we saw a supplemental budget with almost nothing in it to address the cost of living crisis. We are not convinced, no matter how much funds, no matter how much money is available to PVP, that the link between that and people in Guyana benefiting is not an established link. So until we see evidence that that actually is the case, the PVP could raise $1 billion, could raise $2 billion. We, unfortunately, are always anxious that it will end up in the hands of the PVP's elite.
Thank you. Mr. Adam.
I have one more question, and then I'm done.
Okay.
Earlier in the statement, Mr. Critchlow spoke about the party reference to the National Drama Festival and some other matters relating to culture and sports. What do you say to the fact that your party, when it was in power, canceled the Guyana Literature Prize for Literature and was not able to put through the national sports policy? And you now speak about the National Drama Festival.
Thank you very much for your question, Tamika. I'm not going to comment on the price of literature right now. There's its own issues surrounding that. What I will say is that August 2020, the PVP were installed into government. And they had, from then up until now, to move forward anything that was on the table. The sport policy, the youth policy, the cultural policy. And to date, we have not seen any movement on it. Actually, the youth policy, which was tabled by the APNU-AFC, would have expired in 2020 when they took over. And no attempt has been made since then to update it, to go back to it. The sport policy that is there, nothing has been done. And so often we hear, oh, when you are in power, forgetting that you had more than 2 years to do something. And so, again, we'll reiterate that we are concerned that all of the issues and all of the power has been consolidated into the minister's office, and tasks that are supposed to be done by directors are being done by the minister's wife. And so these are the issues that we are concerned with about the management of the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport. And again, we are asking to show us where the $3.2 billion that that was allocated for sport is gone. And, you know, those are the issues that we are concerned about. And I will end by saying that 2.5 years is enough time for you to revisit any of the policies, because significant works were done on those policies. Significant works were done on them.
Thank you. Mr.
Yeah, but if the new AFC was finding challenges in instituting these kind of policies and carrying out certain certain cultural stuff like the Guyana Prize for Literature, would it then not say that the ACNU would have to accept that the PUP may be finding challenges? How can the ACNU say that they're commenting on these things when they were in office obviously had challenges because they did not put them through?
We had no challenge carrying out the National Drama Festival. The National Drama Festival was carried off.
No, I'm speaking about the National Sports Policy and the Guyana Prize for Literature. Those are the questions I'm asking about. So can you say if you had challenges carrying them out, and say, well, then if other parties will not have challenges in also carrying out certain things? What were the ACNUFC's challenges in carrying out these things while they were in power?
Challenges aside, we have said that the work done by the APNU AFC was not built upon. Nothing has been done since August of 2020 on any of the policies. So we can't even talk about challenges when no attempts were made to do anything. So they actually had no challenge because they took no strides to make any movement forward in those policies. So we can't even talk about challenges. They haven't come out and said any more challenges. They didn't do anything.
Right, before you shut down, may I ask a question?
Yes, you
of
can go ahead.
in pink, Ms. Nemo Flores?
Go ahead, Mr. Harry.
Yeah. I see you getting like the opposition leader, the president, you attracting protests. What happened? What caused it? What do you do to people?
Bring the mic a little closer.
Thank you, Mr. Aris. I'm not sure what's the question you're asking.
The question is, what was it that sparked the protest against you? And I saw some other things going with some PPP people raising pickets against you and calling for an apology. So the question is, what did you do to warrant that?
Well, Mr. Aris, I'm going to answer this way. I have done nothing that warrants that. I cannot help people to read and comprehend if they don't understand something. I am a sitting member of parliament and a resident of Mocha Arcadia community. And I've been representing my community in all other areas, all other constituencies. And if there's things that I need to highlight, I do so. And I am reachable. So if someone felt that there's some issue with something that I would have said, all they had to do is reach out to me for clarity. That's what I expect. And you know what's strange is that you see all these people protesting and all of that. There's so many issues happening in the Mocha Arcadia community. For example, the people at Caneview that is being removed. The blocking of the drainage canal in the community that is affecting our farmers. We have the invasion of our lands. We have ministers running the community without communicating with our elected officials. But yet still, I have not seen any of those individuals standing up with a placard or making their voices heard on such key and pertinent issues. And that is very concerning to me.
And you know, Adam...
Yeah, so why did they pick up the placard against you? What did you say?
Adam, before my colleague Nima goes forward in answering it, the People's Progressive Party is a master, if I may dare say, in distraction politics. The real issue here is the way in which the people of Mocha Arcadia are being treated. The real issue here is them trying to take the ancestral lands away from the people of Mocha Arcadia. There is a sketch that shows that the road they are claiming to go through there will not be in the people's land will not be in the path of that road. But there's a deliberate attempt to try and distract the real issue and focus on my colleague, Nima Flubes. The issue here has to do with the treatment of the people of Mocha Arcadia. And if there is anything we should be proud of, is the representation that Comrade Nima Flubes has been making for her community. And I'm proud of her for that. And it goes back, I want to juxtapose it to what has happened in Den Amstel, where Minister Indar went to that community playground and instructed that the gates be open. In fact, went as far as to cut the locks that were put there by the NDC, the authorized authority that has the power to administer what happens there. We cannot allow the system to fall down. We cannot allow the system to break. We will be going into anarchy. We will be going into pandemonium. The Regional Democratic Council awarded a contract for works to be done in the ground. That is good. But what is better is when they take the contract and bill of quantities and present it to the Neighborhood Democratic Council and present the scope of work to the Neighborhood Democratic Council and the community management, the grounds management committee. You cannot arrogate unto yourself that power to disassociate from the local democratic organ that is a constitutional body. And the Constitution, if you're going to disrespect the Constitution, then it means that we're going nowhere. So Minister Dharamlal, for example, he deserves right now to apologize to the people of Den Amstel. He has to do that to the people of Guyana, because what he did there was wrong. But what do you see them doing? Distraction politics, coming to talk about us not wanting development in a community. Totally untrue. So I'm asking you, my friend, and I'm asking the public, not to fall prey into the distraction politics of the PPP. Do not lose sight of what is the issue and what is the real problem. Thank you.
Adam, I would just like to add that personally, it would be remiss if I do not offer similar words of support for my colleague MP, Ms. Nima Flubes. Ms. Bess has been a champion, one of the best MPs on the ground across the country, particularly in her community on the East Bank, standing up for the rights of the people on the East Bank and particularly her community. So I believe, the first thing is that the Minister of Housing, Mr. Kroll, has to offer an apology to our MP because he caused this problem by his high-handed behavior and by his obvious land-grabbing approach in relation to this issue. He owes her an apology. He owes the people who live in that area whose homes would have been destroyed. He owes them an apology. He owes the community of Mocha Arcadia an apology. And what is not being said, and I want it to be recorded, what is not being said is that this issue of the Mocha Arcadia is an issue of economics, is an issue of the government acting in a high-handed manner. It is obvious that, as my colleague MP Ganesh mentioned a few moments ago, the people living in this area cannot affect the road. Cannot affect the road. But what is the underlying issue here, and what is the elephant in the room that I will address, which is that they do not want to have the people living there, who are largely African Guyanese, to benefit from the opportunities which would come naturally from being close to a road, a major road, and the economic benefits and impact that will derive to them. That is the issue here. So now let's try to talk about NEMA issuing this, NEMA doing that, and the PPP jumping up and down. This is simply about another manifestation of a racist approach by the government to marginalize people of African descent, marginalize people from the Mocha Arcadia community from the benefits of what they say is part of the One Guyana program. The One Guyana program on this situation alone has been proven to be a fraud, just as the president and his government is.
Thank you. All right.
Quickly, can you please permit one last question from me? Sir, what makes you confident that the coalition will remain intact in the National Assembly when the AFC departs at the end of the year of the coalition?
Because I would like to indicate to you that the list is one indivisible list for the life of the term. The Alliance for Change has indicated it publicly through their leader, and my party recognizes that the list is one indivisible list for the life of the parliamentary term. They have said so, and I'm confident that it will remain that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. As we are closing today's press conference, Mr. Critchlow.
Yeah. Just a quick comment. If you can circle back to the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport. I want to let us take note of the ministry's treatment of Mashramani. And those of you who are observing, I can probably ask if anybody knows what's the MASH theme. We saw that there was a launch of Mashramani, a launch party on the 25th. And the general lackluster approach by this government to Mashramani and the low-key, very low-key, the low-key approach to Mashramani as opposed to, and we juxtapose that against the fanfare for Carnival and Cricket Carnival. And we are, of course, raising this flag. We're raising this flag and we bring it to the attention of the Guyanese people. It seems as though this government is attempting to minimize the Mashramani celebrations. We don't know any dates of any competition. There was no public competition for the theme. We don't know any of the activities. Apparently it was launched. And if anybody in the media can tell me anything about Mashramani, and we were 79 days away from Mashramani, that is concerning to us, and again speaks to the approach of this government and the slow death of culture in Guyana. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I would like to thank our media personnel for joining the press conference today, and thank you to our viewers as well on Facebook and the other platforms. Do have a wonderful afternoon.